Hi class, welcome back to Nonprofit Management. We are excited to be here today, and it's actually the proper title is Leadership in Nonprofit Organizations. We are excited to have y'all back this week. We're in week 5. I'm Professor Everett, y'all have seen me before, and I am filling in this week for Dr. Sanborn again. He is in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona at a national conference for early education leaders, so that's pretty exciting. Today we have here, though, the CEO of Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston, Martin Cominsky. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure to be with you.
We are very excited to have you, and Dr. Sanborn is sad that he can't be here to interview you himself.
I miss him.
You have been doing some really great work at Interfaith Ministries. And for the students in the audience who don't quite know exactly what Interfaith Ministries does, can you talk about how it meets the needs of very different large populations in Houston?
Sure. Interfaith Ministries is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 61 years. We have 3 principal activities as our mission. One is to serve homebound seniors. There are probably about 10,000 seniors that live in Houston that can't leave their home to get groceries, to buy food, and to prepare food. And so Meals on Wheels, our largest project, is our opportunity to deliver a hot meal to them each weekday, and to make sure they have a breakfast meal as well, and also food for their pets through our Animeals program. So that is one of our largest efforts and an important part of the Meals on Wheels America movement. We are also one of the largest refugee resettlers in the state of Texas, and we are responsible for resettling about 2,100 refugees every year in the Houston community, and that's about 40 a week, 8 a day or so, or 10 a day. So it's a big part of our work in welcoming the stranger and making sure that they have an opportunity to restart their lives after they've been traumatized by many difficult situations in their country of origin. And the third part of our work and the foundation of our work is working with the faith community to help people understand about different religions, how religions work together, can work together and collaborate in service. And our organization was founded on the principles of people of faith working together for shared beliefs. And so together we have programs like our dinner dialogues that help people learn about other faiths. One coming up to help people learn about Islam in mosques around the city, and in many other ways through young leadership programs, through youth service days and opportunities for people of all faiths to work together. We're an $18 million organization, and I've been the CEO for about 14 months now.
That's fantastic. Y'all do some amazing work, and I've been an intern there in the Meals on Wheels program.
We're very lucky to have you.
It was fun.
So you go on to great new things too.
Thanks. And I got to really witness how that program ran like a well-oiled machine most days, until we had power outages or floods, and then it was go time and there were policies in place. And there are a lot of different levels of management within the Meals on Wheels program and refugee program. And so can you talk about your style of leadership in an organization that big, doing that much very impactful on-the-ground work every day?
Well, in nonprofits, I believe that it's a people-first kind of culture, and that everything you do really has to be based on the people, considering the needs of your clients and what you're trying to do for them, but creating a warm and hospitable environment for the employees to do that work. We can't help others unless we are able to help ourselves and create a teamwork that really makes that possible. Our HR director is leaving soon, if anyone's interested in that assignment. But interestingly enough, I'm thinking about creating a chief people officer instead of a director of human resources, to really remind ourselves and to find someone who more fully can address all the needs of the people in our organization. we're an $18 million agency, and there's a lot of financial business stuff that has to happen. But in the end, we can't deliver our services to helping seniors and refugees unless we put on that smiling face and have the right attitude to help our neighbors grow and develop in the community.
That's a really fantastic idea. A chief people person?
Right, chief people officer,
Officer,
CPO.
got it.
Yeah.
I like that.
So some corporations have that. You'll find some of the high-tech companies do that. And while they create informal working environments, there's people that are always thinking about the organizational dynamics and how it handles the people in addition to the money and the business affairs of nonprofit management.
And that's great, especially in a nonprofit where not everyone is making the most money out there.
Right.
They're doing it because they love the work, not because they're, wanting to make a lot of money.
Right,
So
right.
happiness is important.
But nonprofits are a business, and I think that people make a mistake when they hear the word nonprofit and they think, well, we don't make a profit. If you don't bring in more money than you send out, you're not going to survive for long. So
Right.
We're not for profit, and obviously while we have stakeholders instead of shareholders that are not expecting a cash return on things, they are expecting positive outcomes for the community. And that's the profit that we return to the community, is successful outcomes in changing and improving people's lives.
I'm glad you brought up outcomes. Can you tell me a little bit about how y'all measure outcomes and your impact on the community?
Well, sure. It's a new area that is hard to measure. We are looking at Meals on Wheels partly as a health benefit to our seniors, and we believe that there's a partnership that we can create with Meals on Wheels and Medicaid providers and hospitals who, if they get that friendly visit from a volunteer delivering a meal most days, will be satisfied and their isolation will be reduced in such a way that many times a visit to an emergency room where someone might feel like they don't even have something to eat and they need that help will show up a hospital emergency room, and it'll be a $15,000 enterprise for them to visit an emergency room. For $7 we can deliver a hot home cooked meal, a friendly visit, do a wellness check, and deliver a better outcome that people can stay in their homes, that they're not entering into nursing homes and into hospitals, and live more comfortably and safely in their homes. So those are the kinds of outcomes we're looking for. Measuring it is a continuing challenge for us. That's what we need, people like Dr. Sanborn that are good at statistics and measuring things.
That's great. And can you tell me a little bit more about your leadership style day to day when you're probably interacting more with your middle level managers and the top managers of each division?
Sure. I like to think of myself as a consensus builder. We don't take votes of how many yays and nays we have, but I don't go around and make decisions on my own and just issue an edict that today we're going to do this. So I have an executive leadership team that's about 7 senior officers of our organization that meet together once a week. And my job is to be the big picture thinker, to see trends, to see issues out in the community that I think need to be addressed, and to try to build respect for that idea and to try to build consensus around it, and to then have a group of people on my senior executive team say, that's good, we'll do this homework and that homework and make it happen. So consensus building, I think, is an important style. This is not a place where someone rules with an iron fist and just says, today we're going to do this. You really have to build. And from that comes the creativity of all the participants in the group. And a big picture idea I have gets turned into an operational value with lots of great additions to it as the organization proceeds.
That's fantastic. I think that what's helpful sometimes to students is to hear a time when you failed as a leader and maybe how you learned from it or how it moved you into a next phase of your career.
Sure. Well, there's been many failures, so the list could be long, but you do learn from it. I'll talk about a couple different things. One is at a level of the work that I was trying to do in an agency that just was kind of falling on deaf ears and how I tried to address that. And then I can give a management example as well. But I started the AmeriCorps program in Houston through an organization called the Serve Houston Youth Corps. This was during the Clinton's administration, where they created the Corporation for National and Community Service. And they had an idea that the Peace Corps concept that young people were doing for America around the world could be turned internally to the needs of America and to solve those. And so I loved the idea, and I was in a job transition. I said, I'd like to start one of those here. And I looked around the country and created a model based on some successes around the country. We got federal funding for it. I applied for my first big federal grant, and lo and behold, we got $3 million and were able to start the program. It lasted for about 7 years. As the White House administrations changed, different politicians had different ideas for that particular program, but maybe one day we'll see it be strong again. But one of the frustrations I had is that we were with young people trying to inculcate the values of service, of caring, of honesty, of building trust in the community. And we had an opportunity to be in an event where I took about 15 people to learn about the community and to serve in a role as ushers at a major community event, and to really see how they could make a difference. And as we were driving back through downtown Houston after this event, a car sideswiped us, and we were in a van, and we weren't hurt. No one was hurt. In fact, you wouldn't really know it unless I just realized that the car had been swiped and decided I better pull over and check. And my frustration was that a lot of the young people that were on that van, who were all okay, we went to dinner afterwards, the next day came in with, oh, my neck hurts, my back hurts, I'm going to sue, I'm going to do this. And it really frustrated me because the whole purpose of this young service corps was to teach people about service and caring for others and how they could make a difference in that. And when they went from being able-bodied and well and enjoying dinner at Luby's to the next morning being sick and needing to be out, really frustrated me. And I said, you know, I have not conveyed what the purpose of this organization is if these folks are doing it. It took a long time. We educated, we were patient, and a couple of people initiated a suit and ultimately dropped it. But it just reminded me, you know, we have to teach people there's not something for nothing. Suits are a mechanism to help people in distress, but when you're not in distress, it's not a mechanism to do that. And that you have to really understand your role in helping society. There are going to be difficult moments. There's going to be tragedies. Hopefully, thankfully, no one was hurt in this. But we just have to remember the service that we provide, and we're not in it for ourselves and what we're going to get out of it, but what we're going to give to it.
That's a good lesson.
There's been management examples where, you know, we built up ideas with boards. You know, really working with a board is a very important part of nonprofit management. And I've had the chance to work with 5 or 6 great boards of directors. But you really have to remind them of their duty of care to the organization and caring about the mission and being responsible for helping direct the purposes of the organization toward that mission. They really have to have a duty of loyalty and of understanding that this organization matters, that they're responsible to this organization. I've had situations where people have been on many boards and simultaneously are doing things that really compete against each other's efforts. And so you have to choose and make some organizations your top priorities and really give your loyalty to that. And finally, generosity. That this is really, you have to come with a generous spirit to accomplish the work of a nonprofit, to give what you can. Everyone may not be as fortunate to give millions, but everyone can do something. And if you don't come with that attitude, if you come for what you're going to take away from it, it'll never be a success. It's all about what you give to it.
So in thinking about boards, what are some really best practices that you've seen in terms of board engagement, the commitment level that they should have, mandatory giving requirements or voluntary giving requirements?
Right. So I do think it's important that you have expected contribution levels. It's always helpful to me to be able to talk with someone when I'm inviting them on the board to set the expectations properly. The most difficult part has been with people who've served on a board for a long time, and they remember when, elbow grease was all that was needed. But now it's really important that people understand that if you can't fund the organization and support it, that the organization's not going to succeed. There's many ways to do that. I mean, people that have the personal wealth that can do it, it's great when they can give it or their company can give it. But they also have friends and have networks and relationships, which they really have to rely upon and look to and seek funding and support for their organization. So whoever comes on a board really has to understand that there's going to be some element of giving or getting to help the organization succeed. It just won't do it without it.
Yeah, that's good.
There are other things in terms of good board members. Having diversity on the board is really important. We had a major foundation in Houston say that they weren't really funding our area of interest anymore, but the diversity on our board was so exemplary, and the work that we were doing to bring the community together as a convening organization was so important that they were going to give us money outside their regular mandated criteria for it. So I think that was impressive to me, and because we're an interfaith board, we have Jews and Christians and Muslims and Baha'i and Sikhs and Buddhists, and it really does bring a wealth of different points of view to the table, and that's really helpful when you're thinking about serving a city as diverse as Houston.
Wow, that is extremely important, and that is something that we talk about a lot in this class, and I've seen online talking about diversity in race, religion, gender,
right,
education, experience. One thing there are a number of things that Interfaith Ministries is really strong at. Volunteer base, having a strong volunteer base. It's something that I didn't really recognize as a strength until I came to Children at Risk, where the way we operate is research and advocacy, and we have almost no opportunities for volunteering.
Right.
So that's a wonderful asset. Or in your branding, I mean, just looking at, I don't know if you can zoom in on these pamphlets that he has. This is a pamphlet, and then this is a newsletter that looks like it is quarterly. And it is just, I mean, it's really fantastic, the kind of marketing and branding that y'all have. Also, partnerships that you have, KUHF,
Right.
That's a really valuable one. For those that don't know, it's our local NPR station, 88.7 FM. I listen to it every morning, and it teaches you a lot about what's going on in Houston.
It does, and my predecessor deserves the credit for recognizing that as a sponsorship opportunity for us. And for those that are listeners of that station, they're very much in the target group that we want to appeal to as donors. And while we don't ask for a donation online, when someone gets our request for money and they hear, oh, Interfaith Ministries, Meals on Wheels, they hear that every morning on the traffic report or the weather report, they're like, oh yeah, they must be something important. I hear about them every day on NPR, and it's really helped us boost the credibility and the name recognition that we have in the community.
That's fantastic. So how do you really cultivate those strengths and make sure that you don't lose any momentum in building, progress and keep improving them?
Well, when I started, there was, the board said to me, one of the things you ought to consider is the name. Interfaith Ministries, some people think that I'm the minister or the rabbi, as the case may be, of some church. Some, really don't understand. There are people that may shy away from us because they think we're a religious organization. Most of the focus is on the interfaith work. And so there was some thinking that we should change our name. when I came on. But after talking to stakeholders and seeing the brand recognition that we had developed over the years, if anything, we may use the name I Am, and our logo prominently features the I Am. But it's so important to our work because interfaith work is our basis. And the ministries, I'm able to be on Christian radio stations a lot and things because people understand that our work is faith-based and they're eager to have us on. So I think for as many as it may confuse, there are others that have an immediate relationship that are people of faith that say, this is something I want to be a part of. And so we've really focused on using that brand as best we can and to connect with people of faith and people of no particular faith. We have a meeting space. We took over a bank building, and we have the lobby of the bank that we've made into a great hall. And we invite people to come there and to use it as a convening space. It's a place that people of all religions can come and feel comfortable. It's a place when the Muslim community can't get people to come to a mosque that they can use our space and at least bring people together. And that's what we want to be, to see both our building, our name, our programs all have this constant kind of outreach and let people think of I Am as I am, and I am here to help you.
That's really neat. You mentioned earlier your predecessor, Elliot Gershenson.
That's right.
He had a wonderful reputation, was well loved in the community, and so were you in your previous roles. So
Thanks.
How was it really taking over this leadership position after there had been such a long, steady leadership?
Well, Elliot is a very competent professional, and I think organizations go through different periods where they need different kinds of leadership. Elliot was, a financier, knew a lot about how to think about funding the organization. He actually came in at a time where we were involved in many programs, some of which weren't profitable, and were dragging down the organization as we were operating them at a loss. So his leadership was really critical at that time to financing. He had a dream that we could have a building of our own. We were in a building on Montrose that was way too small for us, that required us to separate our operations into multiple buildings. And he had the vision that we could buy a building in the heart of Main Street in Midtown that's growing as a center for arts and culture and activity and restaurants and bars and all those things. And he put the money together and the support together to build two buildings, one for our administrative facilities and refugee services, and one for our Meals on Wheels operation. So those were things I might not have been able to do as well as he did, and I'm very grateful for his leadership, and he has been very supportive of me in the new role. I'm a people first person. I'm thinking about the diversity of our city and how can I do things that are going to bring people together. I'm a collaborator with other organizations. I'm looking not to take other organizations over, but to think about how we can collaborate and be more effective. And so we have different skills. I'm grateful for what he brought to the organization, and I hope my successor someday, not anytime soon, will be able to take the support that I brought to the organization and move it on to next steps that it will need in the future.
So you mentioned not taking over other organizations, but really working with them, making sure resources aren't being duplicated or efforts aren't being duplicated. We've had a number of discussions here about the amount of nonprofits in Houston and the kind of work that's being done. And what do you say to students who want to start their own nonprofit, perhaps already have started their own nonprofit? Do you have any advice for them?
Well, I'm of two minds about that. One is that I think there are a lot of nonprofits in the tens of thousands in our community, some large and great and some small and aspiring. I think I have a saying that others have said, no act of loving kindness is ever wasted. And so no act of creating an aspiration to help other people and to try to do something for the community is wasted. I don't believe it is, but there are more efficient ways than other ways that you can actually get the job done, perhaps by volunteering with an existing organization, by looking how you can extend their services. I mean, we do Meals on Wheels from our location in Midtown Houston, but Katy needed Meals on Wheels, and we said we could help in Katy, and we were able to work out an arrangement where we deliver the food to a church in Katy, and then the volunteers from Katy take the food from there to residents, senior residents in their community. So they didn't need to create a whole new 501c3 and structure and reporting to do what they wanted to do, which was feed seniors in their neighborhood. So I just remind people, look around the canvas of our city. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great things, and they'd like your help, they'd like your leadership, and you can do it sometimes by working in partnership with others and not creating your own thing. This is got to be a business that's not about ego and not about personal wealth. If you're really focused on what you're going to get out of it, the nonprofit sector is not going to probably be the place for you. If you're focused on caring for others and sharing the talents that you have with others, then I think there's a lot of good ways to do it. And first I'd start to look around and see where you could find others that share a common interest. And the internet makes that so much easier than it was when I started some 30 years ago, 35 years ago or so.
Very true. It's great advice. And you had mentioned earlier the kind of work you do, particularly with dinner dialogues around getting other people to be open to experiences and just learn about people that are different than them and different ideas. I think in an age where everything is so polarized and people are extremely opinionated, it's getting harder and harder to listen. So can you talk about how you as an organization really try to bring people together to listen to each other?
Well, I think one of our qualities is that we're a listening organization, that we're listening to the needs of seniors, that we're with every individual family that we resettle from a foreign country as a refugee here. We're trying to be in tune with their needs and help them do that. So I think that as a nonprofit leader, you have to amplify those listening skills and really take it in and look at what people's needs are and then be able to try to respond to those needs. I think empathy is a really important skill for nonprofit leaders to have, that you can observe, you can talk to someone, you can listen a lot, and you can kind of walk in their shoes a bit. You can kind of get a sense of what it's really like to be in the shoes of the people that you're trying to serve if you're not one of them already. And that grounds you in a very important way. I try to get out and deliver senior meals a couple of times a month myself, just because I need to meet seniors and see how they are and what their needs are. And I always learn something from that experience that improves the organization. So it's, I think, important that people get out and experience it. My career has been driven by my own volunteer work. And I've never had a job that I didn't get by volunteering and knowing it first. I've never just sent in a resume to a blind thing and said, well, I hope I get it. It's always been, I've been involved. I was involved in Interfaith Ministries for many years before I became its staff person. I participated in their Muslim, Jewish, Christian dialogues and knew a lot about the organization, knew a lot of the players, and that made it easier for me to make that transition because I could come in having worked as a volunteer, having done and seen the programs firsthand. And that's happened to me in every part of my career. So I do encourage students to really look at the possibilities of interning, of being volunteers, of being active in an organization that they have an interest in. One of the things that surprises me most is when someone comes, I'm a people person, I care so much about your organization, and we've been around for years, and they haven't acted on that caring and concern. So it's really important that if you care about something, if you really want to demonstrate that, show up at some volunteer events, express your interest, and do that at a time before you're being considered for the job.
Great. I hope all y'all listen to that out there. That's some really good advice. So let's turn to some student questions. People have been tweeting up a storm, and there have been a number of questions about your refugee work, and especially in the political climate with everyone from our governor today to a presidential candidate talking about the need to be more careful in taking in refugees, and that empathy has to be balanced. The fact is there's still going to be refugees coming here. So how does Interfaith Ministries respond to that and meet those needs when there are going to be fewer federal dollars coming in to help?
Well, today was a disappointing day because, as you may know, the governor decided that Texas would no longer accept federal funds for refugees. And what that means is the Health and Human Service Commission had been accepting the money from the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and then they made the grants to the various Texas providers of refugee services. Today, they announced that they would no longer do that, and they have a 4-month transitional requirement that they have to keep doing it for 4 months until the feds can figure out another option. Fortunately, there were Congress people in the recent years that have figured out that this at some point might be an issue, and they created an alternate pathway so that organizations like ours could get their money through nonprofit fiduciaries rather than the state. So in the end, in 4 months from now, I think we'll be okay, and we'll be able to continue the work of refugee resettlement. It is very disappointing to me that it becomes a political volleyball. I think that what everyone needs to understand is how active the vetting is on the refugee process and how that happens. And let me take a moment to just explain that.
Please.
So the United Nations High Commission on Refugees has staff people and volunteers around the world that are certified to assess the needs of people who claim that they need to get refugee status because their lives are at risk and their freedom is no longer available to them. So in countries like Syria and other places, there are UN representatives that can generally be reached by most citizens there to claim refugee status. The UN has to give that status. And once they survey the person's situation, their safety, and make that status, they help get the person to a safer place, to a refugee camp or to another country that they can at least have temporary safety while they are now considered as a refugee. The UN provides a list of possible refugees and big pools of refugees to different countries around the world who make decisions to accept refugees. There are probably 65 million people that need refugee status and need refugee resolution. And the United States takes 110,000 a year of those, and that's up from 85,000 recently. So President is trying to make an effort to increase our efforts to serve refugees, but once the person is declared a refugee and the United States agrees to accept a family of refugees, they go through a vetting process that is anywhere from a year to 18 months to even 2 years. They're getting the CIA, Homeland Security, many intelligence services are investigating. They're replaying stories. They're talking to their relatives separately. They're trying to make sure that they're getting the most complete security profile of this person. And so I don't know how it could be any better. We've been accepting refugees for 40 years. in this process. There are some cases where people, even years after they have come, have been involved in criminal acts. But there are people that are born in the United States that after those years also engage in these things. So I don't think one can easily label refugees as criminals and as terrorists. And if that's the message that students can help us convey to others, to not be afraid of this. These are people that are in their most vulnerable part of their life. Some of them are having organs taken from them before they leave their country of origin by the governments so they can set up organ banks and sell those. There's just horrible stories that you hear, and you see wonderful families coming with grandparents and children and grandchildren that are just looking for a better life. And it's the greatest opportunity we can give them to take them out of harm's way and bring them to safety and let them begin to breathe and recreate their lives. Within 6 months, they are able to pay for their own rent. They usually have a job. They have enough money to at least pay for their basic necessities. They're enrolled in schools or colleges. They are getting food, and so they're on their way. And it's just such important work that we do along with 4 other organizations that do this in Houston. You can't be scared by it, and we can't play into this rhetoric that just has people so xenophobic about anyone that's different from us. And that's why I think our dinner dialogues are important, to get people to meet Muslims, to see how they observe their faith in an American lifestyle, and to understand that people coming here just because of their faith are going to be terrorists. They're not.
How can students, can they participate in the dinner dialogue?
Sure. Well, our next one is coming up in October, and it's focusing on Islam. It's October 27th, and you can go to the Interfaith Ministries website. It's IMGH, like Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston.org, and you'll see right on our front page, it talks about dinner dialogues. And we invite you to come. You'll have a chance to visit a mosque. There are 7 different mosques participating, and you can choose one close to you, have dinner, meet people of the Muslim faith, see their worship center, and ask all those questions that you've always wanted to know about another faith that'll help you begin to understand that there's so many people in Houston that care about our city, that are of the Muslim faith, but are not here for terroristic purposes.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad that you conveyed that message, because it's really important for students to hear.
It is, and so that's the message. I've been on the phone all day giving interviews to the Houston Chronicle and KUHF and other media outlets, trying to help them explain this, explain what the governor action, what its effect will be, and how we work around it. You have to be very creative in this field in nonprofit management. You have to anticipate the challenges you may face. And we've been meeting for a month already talking about, if the governor were to take this action, how would we continue our services? And so we've worked with the other 5 agencies that do this work collectively. We have a PR person collectively. We're looking at how we pool our resources, and we're there to collaborate in a wonderful way that nonprofits can do that for-profit businesses don't usually do.
That's another great lesson, is planning ahead and anticipating different outcomes that might affect.
So a lot of times, I mean, I have a chief operating officer who can think through, 20 problems for every idea I have. But that really trains us and drills us to say, okay, some of these are possible. Some of them are more possible than others. And how would we address those? And so by the time that we go through that analysis, I think we've made a very good decision about what the risks are, what the rewards are, and how we're going to try to minimize the risk.
Great. Let's go to another question. Let's see. Enye, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. She asked a really good question. What's the best piece of advice you've had in your career?
Well, I've had a lot of great mentors who've helped me along the way. Education is important, and I worked at the University of Houston when I first started my career, and I finished my bachelor's degree in journalism and public relations. And the president of the university I worked for, as just a student assistant, said, I think you need to go continue your education. I was interested in the arts, so I got an MBA in arts administration. And the first part of my career was all around the arts. But he reminded me how important education was and having that grounding. Another part is contacts and building relationships by doing things that you can volunteer, that you can help, to just show you're interested. And I can't count how many people that I just tried to help as a volunteer when I was growing up through the field that I now can turn to and ask them for help and assistance. And they recall, I remember when we worked together 20 years ago on this project. So give of yourself generously, meet people and keep in contact with them. Facebook and a lot of social media give us those chances that I didn't have when I was starting, but now really do that much easier than we did before. I think the other advice is to know your field, know the thing that you want to do really well, and have a passion for it. This industry, it's too hard to convince others to get money, to get the support that you need, unless you really understand all the ins and outs of what you're trying to do, and that you come with a passion for the outcome that you're going to achieve when you do that. And I know when I go in to talk to someone about the Meals on Wheels program that I can say, we're one of the best in the nation. We're innovative about serving breakfast when we're only required to serve lunch. We're innovative about serving the animals a meal when we found out that seniors were giving their meals to their animals. And we're constantly thinking of new ways to try to support that effort. We're looking at, can we make partnerships with the medical community? How can we reduce their cost and get some of the savings that they're going to get from our help to fund the work and serve more seniors? So we're constantly kind of looking at what's the next big thing in our field, and people have to learn to see that. Find some mentors that will help you and to really guide you through it and can give you some advice. I'm fortunate that some people call me and ask me for that kind of support. Someone had an opportunity to grow in an industry that they were already in, but they had just gotten their MBA in a new field. And I was like, yes, that's a good job, but you just spent 3 years of your life getting a MBA on the weekends, and now's the time for you to try something new, to use those new experiences to help. So don't always take the easy route. Think about, what is the next big opportunity where you can make a difference in the world.
That's great. Abe Perez, one of our other students, asked, do you have a leadership role model?
I do. I have many. Like I said, got to work for the president of a university, Barry Munitz at the University of Houston, who helped me get a start. I certainly am very impressed with the work of Neighborhood Centers, Inc. And Angela Blanchard, who's won many awards, is a person that's both a friend to me, and I'm just marvel at the creativity that she brings to an idea and the way she executes it so flawlessly each time. I think there are many well-run organizations. The Houston Food Bank, who I think you may have heard from before through Brian Green, is doing an exceptional job. They are really thinking about how they make that the best volunteer experience and how they create the most food for people that have food insecurity. And Brian is very thoughtful about, hey, potatoes are going to get thrown away at this farm unless I go out there and get them. So I'm going to, buy trucks to go get food from a farm 75 miles away so I can use that food to help solve our problem. And so you have to think about how you can best facilitate the needs of a community. They're not always the easiest or the most obvious ways, but so those are great mentors for me.
That's wonderful. Let's see. Chris Gilbert asks, when you notice a trend and you seek consensus from your executive team, how do you handle it when they disagree?
Great question, Chris, and they do disagree at times. I think we try to understand what the disagreement's about, and we really begin to analyze, is it, we have people that have financial expertise, program expertise, public relations expertise, human resources. So when we're talking at the executive team, we're looking at what are the various concerns. And I think that we always take time to make sure that we hear out everybody. Ultimately, we have to make choices where everything is not perfect. You'll find in any business, and certainly in the nonprofit sector, that you don't have perfect opportunities, that you have good opportunities that you make the best of. And so I think that once you look at the problems and you understand, okay, here's the risk for this reward, that ultimately you decide the reward is worth the risk and you move forward. But I try to hear everybody out before we come to a decision, and most of the time we can achieve consensus as we talk through it.
Right. And I've seen, especially being in meetings in different places, something that's really important for those of us who are leaders on the lower level and in these kind of meetings, they are your executive staff, they are leading big teams of other people, to set your ego at the door. Your ego should not be tied to an idea, and if it doesn't move forward, you just move right along and hop on the idea train of whatever you've decided.
It's not so easy to do that, but I, as a leader, try to recognize people and create a fertile ground for ideas so that they're respectfully discussed and sometimes respectfully dismissed, but that people don't feel that they had a bad idea, that they were humiliated by recommending something, but that they see that the greater eyes of all the people on the team were able to find either what was great about that idea or what makes it not a viable option for us right now. Sometimes we'll go back and say, let's work it a little harder and see if we can address these concerns and still do it.
Those are good points.
We try to do it.
We had a couple other students ask about compassion and empathy, and when you're hiring staff, how do you hire people and make sure that your current staff is, compassionate toward the clients?
We use a survey that's called Predictive Indicators, and it gives you a PI score. And this is a really freaky little system because I did it and I thought, it's really about word choice. It's about looking at words that you think respond to the problem that's presented there. And it's a very successful survey tool in helping identify someone's predictive indicators, which have a lot to do with their empathy, with their compassion. And I never thought that a test could do that, but this one does a remarkably good job of making a sort of scale of where you are on it, and it's different indicators. So part of the issue is where you fall on one indicator, and part of the issue is your relationship to other indicators. And what this survey ultimately does is that you can look at overlays. So if I'm going to hire someone that works for me, my indicators show the kind of people who work best with me. And we can actually apply these human resource tools and kind of look at it. And then if we're very different, we can at least go in understanding that there are big gaps in these two things, but we're right aligned with other things. So part of it is this very scientific approach, and part of it is just feeling people's empathy, when they walk in, the first impression they make, their research that they've done to say they care enough to learn about an organization, to be well prepared, to come to some event, to be able to talk about, I was at your this, or I was at your that, this is what I learned. Those are the things that really impress me when someone has taken that effort to show how much they care.
Good. Wonderful. Let's see. I really like this question. If you were writing a book on leadership, what would be your 5-point plan for becoming a great leader? Or what would be your most prominent chapter?
Well, I think that empathy that we just talked about really is one of the most valuable tools that you can have. That you have to be able to be quickly in touch with other people, and some people do that magically. I remember when I was starting AmeriCorps, it was President Bill Clinton's pet project, and so I had the chance to meet him a couple of times, which was fun. And this man could focus on you. You know, you were with him for 10 seconds, but in that 10 seconds, he could build the empathy, the understanding, and communicate sort of a sense of connection that I've found very few people can do. And so I encourage people to hone that skill, to be able to walk in to a senior's home when you're delivering a hot meal and get a quick sense of the smell that's going on in the room, the windows that are open, the situation very quickly, to be able to size it up and say, how can I make a difference here? You know, and so if you can develop those skills, you're going to be the best nonprofit manager that you can. And it's worth writing a book about. I haven't written it, but it's worth it.
Certainly. And look, what we were talking about this earlier. What organizational culture do you think nonprofits should aim for? Would you say continue with the empathy theme?
Well, the people first theme, to think about activities that that you can do. You know, we're bound by a lot of regulations that we have to think about the effect that they have on people. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires us to record hours and to pay overtime for what's called non-exempt employees, people that are doing functions that are on an hourly basis that very much support the organization's efforts. So we made a transition because of the law that we didn't normally have a time clock and check in our drivers to deliver meals. But ultimately, because of the regulations of the federal government about monitoring hours and overtime hours, we had to clock people in and out. And while no one ever said that you can't clock in at 8 o'clock and talk to your colleagues and have a little breakfast and get ready for your route, because we pay people for an 8-hour day, the sense became, oh my gosh, if I'm clocking in, I have to begin work right away. I can't visit with my friend anymore. I can't have breakfast. And it created a perception that we were a much more rigid organization, that people had to work by the hour, clock in, clock out, whatever. And that was never our intention at all. We have a responsibility to pay people fairly, and if they're going to work more than 40 hours a week, we have to pay them overtime by federal law. But that wasn't meant to change the culture of our community. So we've really had to work hard to kind of say, come in for breakfast, we'll provide the breakfast, and get yourself ready. The exchange of ideas about the seniors that they're serving, all of those things are just as important as them loading up their car and getting out there and driving. So sometimes you have to be counterculture to what the apparent regulations and things set up the climate to be. And you have to be aware of that. And I never thought of that. We're paying people fairly. The work hours were there. And they said, Martin, what we're really missing is that fish fry that we used to have on Friday afternoons when we came back from our meals, and we could fry some catfish and sit with our friends and our colleagues and just kind of talk about the week we had. So we're adding back fish fries and gumbo days and chili days and all that stuff.
Those are really important, especially, I mean, for this, that's hard work. Driving around for 8 hours. I've been on a route before, and I am like, this is not for the birds.
I encourage all of you to come do that job with us. It's rewarding. There's a national campaign through our Meals on Wheels of America, and it's called America Let's Do Lunch. And the concept is just take an hour of your day and give it to seniors who need a hot meal. We'll give you a route. They're called fast routes. You can do them in about an hour. And it's a wonderful way to show seniors you care, to meet people. We're not talking about seniors anymore as old people. We're talking about them as genuine articles. Since 1923, they've been with us. And realize that not only are you doing a service for them, but you have a wonderful glimpse into the past as well.
And Are students and other people also volunteer to deliver animal food?
Yes,
food?
absolutely. Our Animals program. All of this is available on our website. I won't try to give you all the phone numbers for the right people, but look at imgh.org and see the many ways you can help out. There's a volunteer page, and we welcome you to join us. It helps us a lot. One of the things that we're able to do is record even your hours of volunteer time as a donation to us. And that's really important because a number of our grants require matching support. So your time can help match other people's dollars and help us in really important ways.
Great. And there are also opportunities for refugee or some volunteering
Oh,
for
right.
refugees in case they're interested in
Adopt
that piece of what
families
you do.
and help meet them at the airport, welcome them to Houston. There are opportunities in our interfaith relations area to be a part of dinner dialogues, to be a moderator or a host, to be a part of our iLead program for high school students. So if you want to help, there's a place for you at Interfaith Ministries.
That's wonderful. And let's ask one fun question. One of these, I'm going to pick Bob's favorite probably. He's a big foodie. He loves the restaurant scene. What is your favorite restaurant in Houston?
Well, this is a tough night to ask that question because the Houston Chronicle's doing their Culinary Stars event, and I'm going to go from here to experience that. There's so many great restaurants at all price levels and all price points. Two that I love. It's called Tien Sandwiches, THIENAN Sandwiches. It's on San Jacinto in Midtown, and it's a great new Vietnamese place. You can order up a storm and never leave with more than a $15 bill. They have great Vietnamese coffees. They have Vietnamese pancakes and crepes and all kinds of salads and things. It's really healthy food, fresh and inexpensive. So I frequent there a couple of times a week. If you're looking for a formal night out or even a more casual lunch, La Table, as it used to be called, Table Restaurant on Post Oak Boulevard next to Cafe Annie is a great place. They have two great venues. Downstairs, it's an informal bar and bakery, and you can get delicious fresh bakery items, and you can have lunch there. And upstairs is the more formal dining room, where they do a lot of tableside preparation, and you feel like your private cook is coming to your table to cut up your chicken and serve you your Sunday meal. So
that's cool.
It's a great city for food.
Definitely.
Enjoy it.
Well, Mr. Cominsky, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know the students learned a lot. I'm pretty sure they may have broken a record in the number of tweets they had today. It was quite a few.
Well, I hope you'll come volunteer at Interfaith Ministries, and we do have a number of jobs. We have 150 employees, so when you're ready, we'll be ready to talk to you. Sweet. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, students, thank you all for being here and for another great week. And Dr. Bob will be back in next week.